Jones, be seated, please, and come to order for the sound session.
Drug and drug-related offenses constitute one of the most serious problems facing law enforcement today.
A peace officer's knowledge of the symptoms of drug or narcotic use will often determine the outcome of a trial or substantially affect the resolution of an important search and seizure question. Recognition of the signs of drug usage may provide the additional circumstances necessary to escalate a stop-and-frisk situation to probable cause for arrest. Furthermore, accurate recognition and reporting of drug use symptoms will provide a narcotics expert with significant facts that will assist in evaluating a suspect's condition.
Under the laws of many states and localities, it is an offense to operate a motor vehicle under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or a combination of alcohol and drugs. The offense may be a felony if such operation of a motor vehicle results in bodily injury. Precise definitions of terms such as drugs vary with the individual jurisdiction, though a drug has been typically defined as any substance or combination of substances other than alcohol which could so affect the nervous system, brain, or muscles of a person so as to impair to an appreciable degree his ability to drive a vehicle in a manner that an ordinary prudent and cautious man in full possession of his faculties, using reasonable care, would drive a similar vehicle under like conditions. The fact that a person's use of a drug is pursuant to a doctor's prescription or is otherwise lawful is not an excuse for driving under the influence of that drug. Furthermore, in non-vehicle situations, in many jurisdictions, it is a crime to be under the influence of drugs, narcotics, or controlled substances, and no additional circumstances are necessary. Under some situations, intoxication from drugs, as well as from alcohol, is included within the prohibitions against public drunkenness.
Lawful use of a narcotics is a defense, but the burden rests with the defendant to prove that his use is lawful.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your name and spell your last name, please.
Ronald K. Keller, K-E-L-L-E-R.
Officer Keller, will you please state your occupation?
I'm a policeman for the City of Los Angeles, presently assigned to Traffic Enforcement Division.
How long have you been a police officer?
13 years.
Officer Keller, have you ever seen the defendant Rico and the defendant Gomez prior to this date? They're seated at the council table to my right.
Yes, sir, I have.
When was the first time you observed them?
On May 15th, 1972, at approximately 3:45 p.m.
Could you tell us how you happened to observe them at this time?
Yes, sir. I was northbound on Main Street near College Street on routine patrol duty. I observed a green 1972 Matador swerving from lane to lane in a northbound direction. The driver continued swerving from lane to lane for approximately a block or a block and a half. I got into a position behind the vehicle. I turned on my red lights and signaled for the driver to stop.
What happened at this time?
I saw the suspect look into his rearview mirror, and the car accelerated rapidly and began to pull away from me. I turned on my siren and pursued the suspect down Main Street towards College Street near the Southern Pacific Railroad yard.
motives and escape from being introduced into the jail. Now, the search can be conducted during the booking process or in the field prior to transportation. In the present case, the motor officer ordered the driver to step from the vehicle and then attempted to conduct a pat-down search based on an arrest for a misdemeanor violation of the vehicle code. Now, in the Simon case, the California Supreme Court restricted the right to search incident to a traffic arrest. However, the court specifically stated that it did not intend to limit an officer's right to order a driver to step from the vehicle for his own protection. Under the Simon decision, a pat-down search for weapons must be based upon specific facts and circumstances, giving the officer cause to fear for his own safety. The suspect's evasive conduct and physical symptoms indicated that he was under the influence. His antagonistic attitude, aggressiveness, and irritability are all symptoms of drug intoxication. These factors would clearly justify an initial pat-down search for weapons after the suspect exited from his car and prior to the assault on the officer.
In 1973, the United States Supreme Court, in the case of United States versus Robinson, permitted the search of an accused taken into custody regardless of the nature of the offense. Since the individual states are free to adopt more restrictive limitations on searches than those required by the United States Supreme Court, individual law enforcement agencies should consult with their local prosecuting attorney before changing their policy on searching persons taken into custody on the basis of the Robinson case.
It was approximately 4 p.m. We received our radio call for a backup unit. I was driving at the time. We proceeded to the intersection of College and North Main Street. From there I could see a motor officer, Officer Keller, holding a suspect at the rear of a late model green Matador.
We got some pills here.
After searching the vehicle, we transported the suspects to Parker Center.
And as a result of that vehicle search, officer, what other contraband or drugs, if any, did you find?
None.
After searching the vehicle, what did you do with it?
We rolled up the windows, locked it, and left it legally parked at the scene of the arrest.
All right, now, Officer Marino, I call your attention to what we have previously marked as People's Exhibit Number 2 for purposes of identification, and have you ever seen that before?
Yes, sir. This is the plastic baggie containing 12 capsules which are removed from the bag of Defendant Gomez.
Thank you, officer. Your Honor, I believe at this time counsel is prepared to stipulate as to the analyzed evidence report, which reads as follows. Counsel may be stipulated that Ernest P. Wilson be deemed to have been called this day, duly sworn and testified that he is a criminalist employed by the Los Angeles...
After the backup unit arrived, the female passenger was removed from the vehicle. Her purse was searched and her sleeves were rolled up to reveal tracks and marks. The legality of these warrantless searches depends on the officer's ability to recognize the symptoms of drug intoxication. Now, an officer need not be an expert But he must have sufficient knowledge and experience to form a reasonable suspicion that the suspect is under the influence of drugs or narcotics. Under these circumstances, a search for drugs incident to the arrest was permissible as a search for instrumentalities or evidence of a crime. A search of the passenger's arms to determine if she had tracks or marks was justified by the officer's initial observations, indicating the use of a depressant, probably an opiate. These same factors would validate the subsequent search of her purse.
My partner, Officer Marino, drove the vehicle. I remained in the back seat with both of the defendants.
When did you arrive at Parker Center?
Just prior to 5 p.m.
When you arrived at Parker Center, was it necessary to physically assist the female suspect at any time?
Yes, sir. She seemed to realize that we wanted her to exit from the patrol vehicle, but it was very difficult for her to comply with our request. While walking with her, she was somewhat unsteady. Generally, one of us would support her to help maintain her balance.
Did you observe anything unusual about the defendant, Rico?
Well, while we were transporting the suspect, and after we arrived at Parker Center, he kept talking and repeating himself in an excited and almost irrational manner.
What's your story, man? You're always hassling people, man.
We can't.
Oh, yeah. Don't say nothing. I'll be all right. I was driving it, man. Got nothing here. What?
Nobody's gonna bother you.
Oh, man. You know, you're always hassling people, man. They're going to make it legal anyway. Yeah, you know. Don't worry about it, baby. Don't worry. You drive up, man.
influence of a stimulant-type drug.
Sergeant, would you describe the condition of the defendant's pupils?
Yes, sir. The defendant's pupils were dilated. That's usual for a person that's using a stimulant-type drug. I also examined the defendant's arms, and there were no marks. He was excited and nervous. His speech was rapid and irrational. There was no odor of alcohol on his breath, and his lips were dry.
Officer, license number vehicle? Frank Ida, King, 196. Answer the man's question. What's your name, sir? What's your address? Now what?
All right, now, Sergeant, let's turn for a moment to the defendant, Gomez. Now, as an expert in the field of dangerous drugs and narcotics for the Los Angeles Police Department, have you ever observed persons who are under the influence of narcotics, and here I'm speaking specifically about heroin?
Yes, sir, I have.
How many times?
Approximately 1,000.
Based on your experience, have you noticed anything physiologically unusual about injections administered by narcotic users?
Yes, I have.
What is that?
There are scabs usually over the veins of the arms. The area of the scabs is normally discolored due to the impurities on the needle. Frequently, the mark is elongated due to a bent or dull needle. Often the area will be abscessed and raised from previous injections and infections. There may be some bleeding from the fresh marks.
All right, now, Sergeant, have you noticed anything physiologically unusual about injections that are administered by doctors or by persons under a doctor's supervision?
No, the injection by the doctor or the nurse is under sterile conditions and not in the veins. It's usually in the fleshy part of the arm or in the buttocks.
How long does it take for these scabs to form?
Well, it depends on the physical condition of the person. Normally they form in 2 days and often last for 21 days.
What size are these scabs?
The scabs are very small, usually about the size of a head of a straight pin. They darken with age until they flake off.
Now, Sergeant, are there some specific objective symptoms which can be attributed to persons who are under the influence of heroin?
Yes, sir. The most observable symptom is the effect that the opiate has on the pupils of the eyes. Other symptoms are deliberate movements and deliberate speech. A person under the influence has the appearance of actually going to sleep. That's what we refer to as being on the nod, and the skin is normally dry and cold.
Sergeant, did you have an opportunity to interview and examine the defendant, Maria Gomez?
Yes, I did.
And where was this, sir?
That was at Parker Center, 150 North Los Angeles Street.
When did this take place?
On the date of arrest, approximately 1 hour after the arrest, around 5 p.m.
Did you examine the defendant's arms, Sergeant?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what did you observe?
On the left arm, in the area of the inner elbow, there was a old discolored area approximately 3 inches in length over the vein. There was another discolored area approximately 1 1/2 inches in length over the lower vein.
Sergeant, did you notice anything unusual about the defendant's physical condition?
Yes, sir, I did. The defendant's actions and speech were slow and deliberate. She appeared drowsy. Her eyelids would close, and while she was talking, she would slowly stop talking, appear to go to sleep, and her head would drop. There was no odor of alcohol.
Sergeant, what procedure did you use when you conducted the examination of the defendant's eyes?
I gave her a light accommodation test, In this test, the degree of light seen by the defendant varies from semi-dark to bright. Officer, would you turn out the light, please? Now just close your eyes for a moment, and I'm going to shine the light right in your eye now. Does that hurt? Doesn't bother you? Okay, fine. I'm going to do the other eye. Look right at my foot. Okay, that's fine. Now close your eyes. I compared her pupils with the pupillometer and found that her eyes were fixed at 1.0 millimeters on the scale.
Now, Sergeant, based on your training and experience, and on your observations of this defendant, and on your examination of her eyes and her arms, were you able to formulate an opinion as to the defendant Maria Gomez's physical condition?
Yes, sir, I was.
What was that opinion?
In my opinion, she was definitely under the influence of an opiate, specifically heroin.
Narcotics and dangerous drugs have different effects on the body. After dividing drugs and narcotics into three general categories, opiates, barbiturates, and amphetamines, several basic symptoms can be readily identified. Opiates, such as heroin, will cause the eyes to contract. The user appears drowsy and is slow to respond. His coordination is slow, yet he can understand and answer questions accurately. His speech, however, is usually slow and sometimes thick and slurred, and he may be in a state of euphoria. Usually his arms will show many scabs and scar tissue, and there may be tattooing over the veins. Now, the barbiturate user, on the other hand, shows no pupillary change, although the eyes seem to roll about. This user has poor coordination and appears drowsy, much like a person intoxicated by alcohol. He is confused, he has difficulty in comprehension. His speech is thick, slurred, and incoherent. The barbiturate user is irritable and antagonistic, emotionally erratic. If he has been injecting barbiturates, his arm will show scabs surrounded by areas of discoloration. Usually there will be abscesses. With amphetamines, the pupils are dilated.